Hey BJ, I was out of the loop yesterday, but I want to say I love your Halloween costume and I appreciate that you don't roll on Shabbos, man.
Hi, I'm BJ, and this is the Arcane Alienist Podcast. That was Jason Connerly of the Nerds RPG Variety Cast podcast here on Anchor, referring to a photo I put up in the Audio Dungeon Discord last week. I was dressed as Walter from The Big Lebowski, and it's kind of a funny story. My brother-in-law is in the picture dressed as the dude, and 10 minutes before he left to take my niece trick-or-treating, he decided to throw on a bathrobe and some sunglasses and some shorts and be the dude for Halloween as he took his daughter around. And when they got to our house, I was like, "Oh, give me 5 minutes," because it's not that hard to put together a Walter ensemble. So we decided next year for Halloween because between the two of us, it took all of 10 to 15 minutes to decide to be the dude, and Walter will put a little more effort into it and maybe try to repeat it next year. Anyway, so I put that photo up on the Audio Dungeon Discord where Jason saw it. It is late. It was, well, the clock just rolled back to 1 o'clock. It was 2 o'clock. I should be in bed. I'm kind of wired. So I thought I'd go ahead and record my next episode. And my wife is out of town. Friday she drove up to Iowa. We live in Oklahoma, so quite a distance for a friend's wedding. And just as my son and I were about to settle down for the evening and go to bed, she calls, and while she was at the wedding reception, someone smashed the window of her car and stole her purse. So we spent the next hour, 2 hours, canceling credit cards, transferring money into savings away from checking just in case someone was able to use our debit card until we can get it straightened out on Monday. And then she's lost her driver's license and her medical insurance card and her social security card and her COVID vaccine verification card that she got with her in case she needs any of them while she's traveling. And then on top of that, tomorrow she's got to drive all the way back to Oklahoma with the plastic over the driver's side window, which is kind of sad. I mean, insurance will cover the damages. It's just a new window and a little bit of chip paint on the door. And we managed to, lock down accounts before anybody could charge anything. And we've got an identity protection policy that I think will help, ensure, we're going to be fine. It's just more the aggravation of everything. Her car is less than 6 months old because we had to get a new one because the previous car she had, which was barely a year old, someone backed into it while she was parked and hit it hard enough that it's just the right angle that they had to total it out. So it's been a bad year for car repair for us, even though we really haven't had to pay for anything because it's just, again, the hassles of stuff like that. So I'm kind of wired and couldn't sleep, so we'll do this next episode. I'm going to do a recap of actually last night's Old School Essentials game, and then we'll end the show with some calls from some other familiar voices. So here we go. Old School Essentials. It's a really exciting thing happened this week. Fantasy Grounds, which is the virtual tabletop I use, we have official Old School Essentials module for it. And I was able to download it and play around with it enough to get it, where I was comfortable using it, which only took about 10 minutes because it works like a lot of the other Fantasy Grounds modules. But I didn't have time to import all the stuff from the other game, which is run in a different rule set, which means I have to kind of rebuild everybody's character and then import the maps and the images that we've used so far. And I just didn't have time to do that. It didn't take a long time. I didn't have time to do it before the game. I did it this evening, on Saturday when I had some spare time. But wasn't able to get it in before the new game. So we'll have that available for us next time, and it'll restore some of the automation we weren't getting with the generic rule set that makes Fantasy Grounds work really well. It is going to cause a couple of rule changes, and I've been rethinking some of the house rules I wanted to play with and try out and drop. I think I'm going to drop usage dice from the game. We forget to roll them anyway, and there's been a lot of discussion on some of the other kind of the anchor community about whether usage dice actually wind up being as useful or interesting as they seem to be on the first pass. So I think we'll just go back to tracking torches and ammo and water and rations the old way. So I'm going to do that. And I think just because this is set up with automated, we'll go back. I'm going to go back to the standard saving throws because they're there on the sheet. They auto-populate and they're easy to roll as opposed to the uniform. I still prefer, if I was doing paper, on paper, live and in person, I'd probably stick with the uniform saving throw mechanic. But it's some of the automation that comes with the Fantasy Grounds is worth it to just go back to some of the standard rules. I did input the firearms rules from Carcass Crawler number 1, so it doesn't change much. It does change a little bit, just minor tweaks here or there. One thing it doesn't have that the players liked that I'm going to keep is with the misfire where you roll a d6 and there's a chance that the firearm explodes in your face and you have to take damage. But for the most part, we've got all the stuff we wanted from the house rules everybody liked that I brought in, like shattered shields will be shattered. That's easy to note on the character sheet. So the cool things people are enjoying and that we have found ourselves using in the game will still be there. And again, it's pretty easy to just add and delete notes on the as reminders to players. Hey, you have this ability. It's not something you have to roll for. It's there. So hopefully we'll be with that next. And we play again here in 2 or 3 weeks. As a reminder, you can always go to ironseer.com. That is the website of Dave, who's one of my players, and he has a whole section where he reviews role-playing games he's involved in, and there's one for the Mythic World of Erd where he posts my written session summaries, so you can always get a written version of these session summaries. He also posts screenshots he takes during the game of the virtual tabletop, and then the captions are usually pretty informative as to what's going on, and a lot of times pretty funny as well. So it's worth looking at if you have a couple of minutes here or there, and that's ironseer.com. And you can pretty easily find the section with role-playing games and the Mythic World of Erd game. Anyway, as far as the summary of this session, so last time they had gone into the lair of these bandits who have been impersonating orcs and raiding along the tradeway, and they managed to kill most of the bandits. They took a few of them hostage, and also kind of discovered they had some camp followers who were non-combatants. And a couple of their captives agreed to, in exchange for kind of their lives and clemency, they would help lure out the captain of their. This is really a mercenary unit. They're functioning as bandits, but they're mercenaries. But they agree they'll help lure out their captain into an ambush if he's there. They've noted that the captain does have some means of coming and going that they don't undetected, that they're not sure what it is. Which they will discover there's a secret passage. So anyway, so the captain's name is Cern Raxor. So the party sets up an ambush. The bandits show them where the captain's quarters are. They're in caves, so it's just a cavern where they've got a door, into the entryway. And the party kind of goes back around the hallway, snuffs out a couple of the torches, and gets just right around the bend of a corner in the corridor leading there, so that they're out of sight. The bandits knock on the door, yell, "We've got intruders, you need to come out and help." The door opens, and Raxor's lieutenant, Lyrit, answers the door, and she looks at the two bandits and questions, "What are you doing?" They kind of repeat, there's people out here. So she and another guard that's posted in there come out in the hall and are talking to these two bandits, trying to figure out what's going on. And so Dolly, the dwarf, approaches from around the corner, and she greets Lyrit and starts to explain, "Hey, there's been a misunderstanding. I'm looking for a friend of mine that I think might have thought had maybe wandered into this cave." Well, then the captain, Raxor, does come out, and he's in the doorway, and he's armed for battle, and note that he's got this really nice-looking, finely wrought shield, and he's armed with a hand axe. And he's pretty suspicious, and Dolly is really emphatic and trying to bluff that, "Hey, I'm just looking for a lost friend of mine." But he doesn't buy it. He says, "Well, you've been in here, you've seen us. It's too late." And he tells the people to kill his, followers to kill her. But that's enough of a distraction that I let the other party have a surprise round. Harold, who's one of the fighters, is able to get off a shot and hit the bandit captain with the arrow, and does some pretty decent damage to him. But the bandit captain's a pretty tough customer. The party pretty easily, they take out the other guards. There's only two of them because there's three bandits, the lieutenant and the captain there, but two of the bandits have kind of turned traitor and were helping them, so they just kind of backed up against the wall to see what was, just kind of watch and see what happens. But they take Lyrit, who's the kind of lieutenant, second in command, down pretty quickly, and they take the other guard there down pretty quickly. But Raxor, the captain of the unit, is not going to go down so easily, and he manages to drop Dolly, the dwarf, down to 0 hit points. But Roderick, who is the paladin, is right there, and he next round is able to heal her before it's too late for her. Harold gets a couple more arrows. I think he got a critical hit on one of his shots. Gets this guy down to, he just got a couple of hit points left, and he finally surrenders. Is clear that all his men have either turned on him or are dead. Anyway, the magic user, Celestina, is pretty easily can tell that the shield is magic, so Dolly claims now she's got a +1 magic shield. So they questioned the captain of this mercenary unit, Cern Rexer, and he reveals that he was hired somewhere in the northern kingdoms by a woman named Victoria Ash. And he tells them that she's some sort of necromancer or dark priest, hired them, gave them this mission to come here and impersonate orcs raiding on the thing, and then she's responsible for the presence of these ghouls that have been created from the corpses of dead orcs that the bandits are working alongside. And that's, he doesn't know much else about her except she's some kind of spooky, magical person. They didn't have much. He tells them they didn't have much dealings with the goblins other than the handover any captives that they took during their raids. So he doesn't know what kind of arrangement that this Victoria Ash person had made with the goblins otherwise. He agrees, hey, I don't want you to hang me as a bandit. I'll tell you where to find her, if you guys go easy on me. So he takes him to a secret door in his chamber, and it opens up into a hidden room. There's a secret door on the other side of the room, and he tells them that she stays in the caves beyond that, but that he doesn't like to go in there because it's creepy and dark, and so they just have this as a meeting room where she'll come and come to this room and chat with him to coordinate things. So they agree to venture through the passage. They go down a little bit and come to a door. There's no sound. A couple of them listen at the door. There's no sound on the other side that they can detect. So Dolly kicks in the door, and there's 2 undead warriors, and these are animated corpses, again, of orcs. They're not ghouls, but they are animated corpses. And then further back in the room, after the encounter starts, Dolly also sees this cloaked figure kind of emerge from from the back of the room and begin to chant, casting a spell. So we got Dolly and Roderick, the paladin, up front, and they're joined by Dominique, who's one of the retainers, who's a fighter. They're battling these undead in the doorway, trying to breach the room. And then Hedemar, the cleric, uses his holy symbol. He turns the two undead, and they're going to flee when it comes to their turn again in initiative, but they also lose initiative on the next round, so the warriors that are bunched up around the door are able to cut them down before they can flee. But the figure at the back tried to cast Hold Person on Dolly, and she saved, and then had a chance to cast another spell and cast darkness in kind of the opening in front of the room where they can't see her anymore. So Roderick and Harold rush into the darkness, and Harold manages to rush straight through and come up the other side of this area of darkness, and is right face to face with this spellcaster, which is Victoria Ash. They've got an amulet on her neck that has this unholy. It's an unholy symbol of chaos. In the meantime, Dolly also lobs a bomb into the room, hoping to hit her, but she overshoots a little bit because she didn't quite hit it. The bomb explodes without hurting anyone, which is kind of good because Harold was standing right there, and if she'd been on target, Harold would have gotten part of the bomb blast. So Harold makes a good, I think I saw, this may be the one where he got a critical hit with he's wielding a halberd, and he hits her pretty good, but doesn't, she's a powerful, like a third level kind of character, so she's not going to go down from one hit. So I kind of describe it as the spike on his halberd just jabs, he gives it right in the shoulder, but it's not enough to kill her. And she puts her palm on his arm and casts inflict wounds or cause light wounds, drains a little sliver of life force away. Then on the next round, he's able to overbear her and pin her to the floor because he wants to take her alive for questioning. And then Roderick kind of finds his way out of the darkness and piles on. So they've got her at this point subdued and captured. So the interrogator, she confesses that her cult slaughtered this local band of orcs and is using their corpses to create undead. And she doesn't know what her superiors promised the Troll King in exchange for the goblins being there, but the goblins came and their job was to clear out the forest and start manufacturing gunpowder. When asked about the Kobold Queen, she tells them that the Kobold's Queen was taken back to the Kobold's original lair for safekeeping. They cleared the kobolds out and pressed them into service in the mine to mine sulfur. They eventually took the queen back to where they captured her and are holding her there. And, they start to, what's the big deal? What's the end game here? What are you really up to? The only thing she'll say is just chaos. This is all about chaos. And, so she's a pretty spooky, maybe a little bit crazy character. So they search her room. They discover rope climbing, which Jessup, the thief in the party, kind of takes and puts in his pack. There's a page torn from a history book that looks like it's a history of the general region, the hinterlands where they're at. And then there's also the stone head of what appears to be broken off of a statue. And it's an orc, and the details are just uncannily realistic. So Harold kind of says, this must have been a monument to some great orc hero to warrant that level of detail. And the Victoria Ash starts laughing and says, he certainly was brave to the end for sure. And he never cowered even when the time came. So suddenly the kobold, Hagel, who's one of the retainers, gasps and is like, the queen. And they kind of figure out the kobold's queen can turn people to stone somehow. So the party they start talking. They agree they probably need to find this kobold queen as quickly as they can. And then the Victoria Ash, the villain, starts taunting them again and says, asks if they think they can actually find her and rescue her before everything that the humans hold dear explodes. And it's like, what explode? What are you talking about? And then they remember, oh crap, the goblins had manufactured all this gunpowder and the bugbears carted it off somewhere. So they still got to figure out what's going on there. She won't tell them anything else at this point. She's perfectly willing to die rather than let anything else slip. and give them many more chances of foiling their plans. So they kind of briefly, and when I just kind of waved this because it was getting time to wrap up, and the few remaining undead that were in the caves were again just animated corpses. So that party strength and the way they were just going to walk through those encounters. This was a dungeon that was really intended for them to find at first level as one of the couple places they could have started, but so it wasn't the biggest challenge for them. But in the meantime, Raxor and the rest of the bandits buggered out, so the only prisoner they have left is this Victor Ash. So they destroy the rest of we kind of hand wave them destroying the handful of undead orcs that are still milling around in these part of the caves. And then they decide to take her back, and presumably she's going to be hanged for both banditry and heresy. Dolly looks at the page from the book and realizes that it just talking about the deaths of Zelagar the Unknown and Reagan the Fearless and their other companions that were the pre-generated characters they all played when we kind of did our demo and tested out the way we had Fantasy Grounds set up, which happened centuries before the current campaign. Recall they died in the collapse of the tower of the Orc warlord Azug III. Notes also that Roderick's ancestor was among the heroes that fell in that battle. And the page also makes a passing reference that Reagan and Zelagar had a secret base of operations thought to be hidden somewhere in the area. Their base was known as Kazkatan, which is a nice Easter egg for anybody who's familiar with D&D lore and the history of the game and old modules and things like that. So that was our Old School Essentials game. We had a lot of fun. Everybody had a great time, and we'll play again in a couple of weeks. Okay, let's take some calls. We've this first set of calls is from Karl Rodriguez, who has the Geomologist Presents podcast. Be sure and check out his podcast. He's calling in response to my summary of our last Pathfinder 2e game, which he is the game master for. So here we go.
Hey, BJ, thanks for the recaps. I think it's cool that, I did a recap, but there were some details that I just overlooked or didn't miss. Maybe I was focused on other things, but I think it's kind of cool that you remembered more about Ren and the rockfish, which is kind of cool. The rowdy rockfish, which might be y'all's hangout. Maybe one day you will make it rowdy with axe throwing and knife throwing and arrow shooting and lots of barroom brawls. So another thing to add that I think was really fun for me is to modify what was going on and the reaction of the NPCs, as minimal as it was, to change the environment and be prepared, not very well, clearly, for the second incursion of you adventuring types. So that's pretty fun to modify things. There's still some mysteries you haven't quite explored in this little area between the pool and the dead kobold and the Miflet lair, but we'll get to that. And we had to have a hard stop because I flew out super early the next day. But yeah, we got to get to that. That's probably the first thing we do to kind of do a debriefing of that encounter and collect all the loot and discuss it.
Thanks, Karl. Yeah, maybe we could. It's a nice, quiet, peaceful place to hang out, but you get some adventurers hanging around, and trouble is sure to follow. So maybe it will become a little more rowdy of a place. I didn't know how much you were adjusting. I can't tell whether you're making stuff on the fly or it's what's kind of pre-programmed into this particular adventure path. But from my perspective as a player, everything's running smoothly and we're having a good time. So can't wait to get back to it. Thanks for the call. All right, and up next we got another call about Pathfinder from Joe Richter of the Hindsightless podcast. What do you got to say, Joe?
Yo, BJ, awesome recaps. Glad you're getting to play in so many games. I love hearing all you guys talk about playing Pathfinder now. It pumps me up. So I'm a super big fan of what Pathfinder 2 did with tieflings. It never made sense to me. Like with half elves, what's the other half? Why doesn't that matter? So I think that's a fantastic switch. And yeah, the Oracle is basically a divine sorcerer. It's been around since first edition Pathfinder. It's one of my favorite classes. They're awesome. And you and Jason both keep referring to lightning arc or electrical arc as being kind of like chain lightning. Electrical arc is to chain lightning as those little black cat firecrackers are to a howitzer. Anyway, man, great stuff. Peace out.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yeah, I think we're comparing it to chain lightning simply in that it's an electrical discharge that jumps from one target to the next. I mean, it's a cantrip in Pathfinder, so it's like a mini version of chain lightning. Not nearly as powerful, but I don't think, I look back actually when I got your call, I don't think there's a Dungeons and Dragons doesn't have an equivalent cantrip to compare it to. So I would still compare it to chain lightning with the note that it's a very small mini version of chain lightning, and not the actual chain lightning spell, which is devastatingly powerful. It is a cool take on tieflings, and I know they did the same thing with like half elves and other kinds of things that are more about bloodline and mixed ancestry and not like a pure singular species. I think the reason 5e has tieflings as a standalone race is because they changed the lore of tieflings in 4th edition, and they just sort of carried that forward into 5th edition. Originally tieflings were plain touched. Every tiefling was a little different in how it manifested the signs of its demonic or diabolical heritage. And in 4th edition in D&D, they changed it to they're just all like tieflings breed true. Like you had a tiefling, who has this infernal bloodline, and if the tiefling has a child with an elf, their children are tiefling. If a tiefling has children with dwarves, they're tieflings. And statistically, they're tieflings. They might have some superficial cosmetic resemblance to their non-tiefling parent, but they're just tieflings. That's kind of the way D&D lore handles that as of now, and at least there's a big story arc in the Forgotten Realms about how that came about that I won't go into now. With explain sort of the lore of warlocks and tieflings in Forgotten Realms, and then I think it's assumed probably the rest of D&D, other settings as well, unless the DM decides to homebrew something different. Anyway, thanks for the call, Joe. Good to hear from you. And now we've got a call from Daniel Norton of Bandits Keep podcast and YouTube channel. So here we go, Daniel. Take it away.
Hey, BJ. Daniel from Bandits Keep. Calling in about the Yawning Portal. Yeah, it makes sense, I guess, right? The ones that were written for 3rd edition, that's basically the D20 system, D&D. A lot of things have already changed. So it makes sense those would work better. I'm thinking now, too, so just to clarify about the Tomb of Horrors parts, I think the reason, we were, I think the levels they suggest, or the top of the levels they suggest, and 5e characters just have more resources, and Tomb of Horrors is really a resource management dungeon. I mean, you've got all the time in the world, and the spoilers for Tomb of Horrors, you got all the time in the world, really. I mean, it's not like there's a ticking clock. But at the same time, you can only do so much. But where 5e, your resources replenish so quickly, and the characters don't need their gear as much, a lot of the things that are setbacks to older editions would not be to 5th edition. I will admit that I power built my character, and they had some levels of rogue and some levels of monk. So effectively, I did tons and tons of damage, had an amazing armor class, could do all kinds of things, and could just literally be walking around naked. Like I didn't need anything. So maybe my character was a little bit overbuilt, but at the same time, the idea that you need to be smart about how you use your tools, it's more difficult in 5e. So I don't think it's impossible. In fact, if I was running the Tomb of Horrors for 5th edition, I'd probably run it at I think they suggest levels 8 or 9. I probably would run it at level 4, which might seem super deadly, but I think that'd amp up to where it needs to be 5e style. Run a level 4 party through there, and I think they would really have a good time because it'd be super challenging, but still very possible.
Yeah, Daniel, I think you're right. I think, that call from Daniel was about our previous comments on the Tomb of Horrors in particular, but the adapting of previous edition modules to fifth edition in the Tales from the Yawning Portal book. Some of them work pretty well, and some of them don't. Particularly trying to go from AD&D to fifth edition, and I think you're right on resource management. Fifth edition, it's depending on the kind of game you want, it's a strength or a weakness. Fifth edition greatly reduces your need for resource management, other than maybe ammunition for ranged weapons. Your spells replenish faster, your hit points replenish faster, and there's just not a lot of it. I mean, the rules are in there for if you want to kind of make people track rations and water and deal with survival and lantern oil and things like that. But it's definitely not laid out clearly. I mean, I've commented on this numerous times where it's not laid out clearly in procedures and up front, and this is not presented as a major part of running and managing the game the way combat is. Exploration and survival, where you wind up having to manage those resources and keep track of time and things like that. So yeah, I mean, if you want a casual game where you just kind of, we don't need to worry about this stuff. This is more a game about, let's go mill around and uncover the mystery and defeat the villain, and that's kind of, I think, what the default of fifth edition is. And you can make it into something else, but it takes a little planning and thought on the DM's part. And I think you make a good point, is maybe, start people at a lower level than you might otherwise anticipate, or conversely ramp up the strength and danger of the enemies and the hazards they face. Good thoughts, Daniel. Good idea there. And if I run Tomb of Horrors, that's probably the 5e version. I think that's probably good advice to start them off at a few levels lower than they suggest. Well, that's it for this episode. I want to thank everybody for listening. Once again, I want to thank my callers, Daniel Norton, Karl Rodriguez, Joe Richter, and Jason Connerly. Again, be sure to check out their podcasts and also Daniel's YouTube channel. They always bring interesting discussion and interesting topics and a lot of good conversation about role-playing and role-playing adjacent topics. Sometimes getting into movies and books and other kinds of things, but mostly role-playing games. So, and of course they run the gambit from old school D&D to retro clones to newer games to indie games and everything in between if you listen long enough. So, a lot of great content out there. So, thank those guys for calling. I want to thank everybody else for listening, and take care out there. And that's it for this episode of The Arcane Alienist. I want to thank Dave Bone for the cover art that I use for the episodes. Check out ironseer.com. And the music is Come and Get It by Scott Holmes Music. Thank you for listening. Give me a call sometime through the Anchor app or at the Anchor website. And I'll be back in the future with another episode.